Hi, it's Kaylee Bateman here for Mixing Light, and today I'm speaking with Hootan Hagshenas. He's a colorist who's just arrived in Melbourne about a year ago and has done his master's in photography at RMIT here in Australia. But prior to that, he is an Iranian who worked in Iran and then worked in Turkey, in Istanbul, and made his way out to Australia only recently. So Hootan, it's so nice to have you here, and it's so nice to have a sense of what's happening in the broader world outside of Australia.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kaylee. I'm so happy to be here. Yes, as you said, I've been doing most of my career in Iran. Tehran is a major post facility, and I just moved to Turkey, Istanbul, actually. And I work on a couple of Netflix and Disney projects in there, and I just moved here. So I've been around for a while. So
You've
yeah.
been around, and you're very humbly glossing over, you're very extremely well known, especially in Turkey, and you've actually created an Oscar-winning feature film in Turkey. So, just doing a few Netflix shows, you're being a bit coy. Can you tell me a little bit about where you started in Iran and what the industry was like over there and how you got your start in color grading?
Yeah, definitely. So my involvement in the color grading world was a bit of a like a accidental like event or thing. So my honors, my bachelor was in cinematography. So back then, in I think around 2008, I was so keen to be involved in the world of the cinematography and moving pictures and like camera works and lighting and all those beautiful things that all the DPs are doing. But we had this lecturer back in the university. So he was, so I'm going to name him because I owe him a lot. So he's Mr. Alakush. Yeah. Yeah. He was a top-notch cinematographer, director of photography, and a member of the IRSC, which is the equivalent of the ASC. So they've got their own guild. So at the same time, he was our lecturer, and also he had his own editing studio, which actually his wife, she was a very famous editor back then, and he was very into all the digital. Like, so it was very new, all the digital manipulation and stuff. So he was very into it. So he was every now and then he was used to try different softwares, like try them and stuff. And he realized that I am also into computer and digital image editing. So he invited me over, and so we had a lot of different errors, and like we had fun with digital pictures, which there was like none back then in 2008. We didn't have anything to play with. After a while, so the first digital cameras came to Iran was by the one of the famous distributors back then, and it wasn't an Alexa or Ari or Red or whatever. So it was back then there was a company, I think still they are working, but not in the digital domain. So they had this camera which is called SI2K. Have you heard it? No.
I haven't. What's the SI2K?
Yeah, there was a company called Silicon Imaging, and they had just one product, one digital camera, which is called SI2K, which was an industrial camera modified to be like function as a cinema camera, which are windows installed in the camera, which is what it was very fun to work with that camera. You see, you used to you could see the Windows logo when the camera was booting up. So it was fantastic to work with that camera.
And so before that camera became available, were you working with film at all, or did you really get into it
No, we
as a
didn't have.
digital colorist?
No, no, no. We didn't have any digital scanners back to 2008. There was one, but just like rarely used and just used for few shots in a whole movie, and the quality wasn't very decent back then. So it actually it was like all the chemical lab and all the color timers were quite famous back then because they just know how to use the like Hazeltine machine to time or grade the
Mhm.
chemical process. So we didn't have any digital DI process back then. What we had was like digital cameras such as like SD, Sony SD cameras, which used to record on tape. And that was all the digital material that we had. So that camera was the beginning of the whole digital cinema back in Tehran, in Iran generally. And so since the camera was there and they needed someone to grade the footage, because it was the first time that people came across with something called log picture, which they had no idea what is a log picture. So somebody had to grade the log picture for them. So I had a chance to. So my lecturer actually introduced me to the company that was just like shaping up. They did, because there should have been some company to do all the gradings, and I had the experience. So they just introduced me, and was just started. Actually, I started the whole digital cinema when it was beginning. So yeah, I'm as old as digital cinema in Iran. Yeah, yeah.
That's great. And what kind of material was being shot on these cameras? Like, what sort of stuff were you grading?
Feature films, most of them. And there was another thing.
Right.
So there were some other people who had the experience, but with like, so sometimes they sent the material outside of the country to be scanned, and just they had the file scanned back. So we had some more experienced people, which I had to opportunity to meet them and learn from them. But like working on pure digital camera files was like just was the process of the beginning of the process, and slowly red one cameras were in, and so like it was a neck and neck. So Si2K red started together, and but everybody was demanding an RE camera, and RE was thinking how they should make a better workflow and more standard workflow into the market, because everybody was confused back then, at least in Iran, how we should deal with the digital files. What's a lot? What's the workflow? How can manage the digital files?
And where were you getting the information from? Because I remember early on we didn't have some of the resources that we have now. Where did you find out what to do with these files, or was it all just trial and error?
So I had another chance because the company that I used to work for, so there was another company, like a sister company, which was the distributor of those products. So we always had constant connection with the manufacturers, such as, so they were the distributor
Right.
of the ARRI cameras, like Si2K cameras. So Si2K was based in Germany. So I had the access to technicians in Germany and ask all those questions, and they were very willing to help. Nicest people I ever met. And so yeah, I could update my information and find out how I should deal with those files, because I was not quite experienced back then in terms of using the digital files. So yeah, so that was the biggest information resource, and there wasn't much information on internet that time back then. But slowly it was just like there was a huge difference between 2009 and 2010 and 2011, because like it was like like a very very rapid process of updating. Everybody was trying to update themselves, and they were also so generous to post all the information over the net, so it wasn't that quite hard to know more about the whole process.
And what kinds of films were being shot in Iran that you were grading? What was the state of the cinema like?
It was like 50% indie movies, 50% funded by sometimes government, sometimes like big facilities, or like they had some big sponsors.
So like
The point was,
studio movies.
exactly, exactly. There is not studio type of movie making back in Tehran. Most of the movies are like done by the independent part of the movie making world, and the other one was like founded by sponsors or like government.
Mhm.
So the studio system is not quite functional back in Iran. I don't know how is it now, because I've been away from the country for a while, so I've no idea what's happening now. But back then it was like 50%, 50%. But the point was like the final. cost of the filmmaking on digital camera, even in the very early days, was much, much better, much, much lucrative for the producers, rather using negatives. So it was a rush towards the digital production back then. So everybody wants to use the digital camera. And the company which I was working for, they realized that if they buy film recorders, like Arri laser recorders, they can like produce huge number of the movies every year. So we had three of those laser recorders, and we've been very busy back then because
Wow.
everybody liked to shoot on digital and record it on negative because we didn't have any sort of digital projections. All the projectors were like in film projectors.
Right.
So I remember there is this big festival happening every year. It's annually, and one year we had 20 movies to finish for for festival, and it was like a madness to finish 20 movies in a very short period of time. But that was the thing that we should have done it. So yeah, and we did it.
That's amazing. So the process was you'd have these films getting acquired on the new digital formats, and then you'd receive a turnover from editorial and you'd conform it and grade it and then finish it, and it would be put back onto film for projection.
Exactly, and we've been in direct connection with film labs, like chemical labs, because having finished printing them on negatives, on films, and especially we had Fuji RDI intermediates, which were amazingly good when we used them on laser printers. And we always been in connection to get the best results out of those recordings.
That's so cool. I mean, I hear a lot about people having experience with like telecine grading and color timing and things like that, but I haven't actually spoken to many people who've had experience of printing back out to film, to be honest. And I don't know if that's just that I haven't come across it yet and there's heaps of people out there, or if it's a special skill. But did you personally have much to do with the printing, or was that handled by a
I had
different
my
department?
colleagues, which were operators of those machines, but we've been in connection in terms of color accurate pipeline, because back then, Ari,
Mhm.
I think they still have it. I'm not quite sure, but they had something called Ari Cube, which was a color pipeline from the beginning to the end. So you would have access to the um, like how Arri lasers are going to print, so you could monitor it on your reference monitor. But anyways, since everything was like fairly finalized in the chemical
Wow.
lab, so we had to be in contact with chemical labs as well. But the thing is that you had to be very patient because one
So
frames per second is like wow.
right. Right.
Yeah,
Oh, so that's how fast
yeah,
it's
yeah.
get it
One
printed
one one
back onto film?
frames.
And so that ARRI system you're talking about, was that like a viewer LUT, like to emulate the film as you were grading? Is that sort of what it was, or slightly different?
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like a CMS program, so something like Kalman or like light illusion
Okay.
that we have these days. So it was like designed for that pipeline. So you had to read your information from your monitor, and you had film profiles, so we could match them together, mix them together, and generate the final film blot, which you could put it on your computer, on your grading software, and you could monitor what's going to be like roughly the final material. I say
Di
roughly because chemical
Yeah.
labs were a lot of the fluctuation of the result were just like heavy. So every now and then we would be surprised by what we saw on the big screen after. Yeah, sometimes it was quite red, sometimes it was good. So yeah,
Wow. Wow, that's so interesting. I suppose that's still something that we have to deal with when you've got a digital cinema projection, and each cinema is slightly different. Their lamps might be new or old, or running at full power or not. So not much has changed in that respect.
that's
You still put it out in the world and cross your fingers, right? And so you
So
were
very.
in that facility for how long roughly did you work there before you made the move to Turkey?
I think 12 years, 13 years.
Wow,
So it was
okay.
there that I just worked. Yeah. So I've been lucky actually before moving to Turkey. So I had the opportunity to grade Mr. Faradi's Salesman, which won the Oscar, and it was after that which I received a lot of offers from overseas. So yeah, so it
Wow.
was like a big jump start for me to have some recognition,
Yeah.
to be exposed to a bigger world. Yeah.
And what was that grade like? Like, what was that process like?
Wow, I would say challenging. I had the chance to work with the director of photography, Mr. Jafarian. He back then he was one of the most famous and experienced director of photographies in Iran, and I had the chance to work with him, and I had the chance to talk with him because not only I learned a lot about cinematography from him, I learned a lot about life and experience of the professional experience of being in the industry because we had 3 months to work together because the movie took almost 3 months to grade, and we did it twice. So we did it based on the references that Mr. Jaffrian showed me, and we did the grade. And so Mr. Faraday joined later, and he decided that we have to adjust some scenes and add a bit of like tone and touch to it. So we said, okay, we have our grading. Let's do it another time and in a different way. And he was so happy second time. Hopefully, he was happy. And I've never seen someone with that much energy in terms of working. So he just worked with us during the day until like 6 p.m. And then after 6 p.m., he used to go to the audio until morning. And again, he was using us for the grading.
Oh my
I don't
goodness.
know how to explain. Yeah, 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 yeah. But he was quite fine. I mean, working with him was quite fine. It was quite an experience working with
So,
two giant icons.
yeah. I mean, in that context of working with people who had big reputations and on a big film, I think it's quite bold to throw away the first grade. Well, I mean, I suppose you probably could have recalled it, but to make that decision to not alter it, but actually to go back and start again. I think that's, I remember a colorist who I greatly admire as I was coming up, Martin Greer, saying that you need to be prepared to, you know, redo things and kind of admit when, okay, we need to make a change in direction, even if the client's in the room. Um, and can you tell me about that? How it went when you made that decision to approach it again from a different direction?
That's so true. I mean, sometimes you have to do it. Um, Sometimes like so when you just make something, sometimes you have to just break the whole thing and remake the whole thing again. It's like having a second chance to work on the same thing. So now you know the challenges, you know the issues, you know the problems, but this time you're ready to tackle the issue. You're ready to fine tune everything, and you know what's wrong in there. There's been time that you just work on a shot which it wasn't working. So it just like took a day to realize what's wrong with the shot, but the next time we were ready. So that the second time it was so faster and we were ready and we knew the
Mm,
issue. Sometimes you have to break it and remake it.
yeah,
Sometimes you just
right.
just fix it. You have to break it and start over. Yeah. Not all the time, maybe.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I know, and knowing when you should do that, that's got to be a skill in and of itself. I mean, I think that's really interesting what you say about like the first pass is almost a way to work out what the problems are going to be. It's like research, but it's like practical research. And then the second time that you grade it, you're coming to it with all of that knowledge that you've built up through that first grade. But it's something that doesn't happen very often, especially not in indie films. You just don't have the time. And I often think about like editors, imagine if your first edit was the one that ended up being the edit for the film. Like, they have a similar process, I'm sure, where sometimes they'll refine a scene or sometimes they might start a scene again. But often as colorists, we're not afforded that time. I mean, even, you're saying you had a 3-month grade for this film. Like, even that's not a huge amount of time to grade it twice.
Exactly. We
I
had the
don't know what
luxury.
the question is. It's more of a comment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had the luxury of time for that project. Not so much time for that because it should have been ready for the release, and there was like a huge workload after the grading, waiting for the movie. But we had a time that we could do all the experiences, and it's not something like you could do it for every movie, definitely. Yeah, but the thing is that Mr. Farhadi was ready for everything. So he gave us the time, and Mr. Jafarian, also the director of photography, he was so calm and like and he know, okay, it's if it's the way, so let's go that way and let's do it great. So yeah, um but this was a very particular project that we had the luxury of time. Most of the indie movies, especially, you have to finish it in 10 days, 12 days. So everything should be
Yeah.
predetermined. Everything should be ready when you're just starting because you don't have the time to go back and change everything. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's a shame that we don't get a chance to do that kind of hands-on research on every grade, though. Wouldn't that just be nice? You think about
Exactly.
how much more enjoyable the process would be as well. So tell me about so after that, you said you got a lot of offers off the back of that film winning that very prestigious award, and it helped propel your career. Um, what was it about Turkey and Istanbul that made you go, "Yes, this is the one. I'll head over there"?
No, I had a great experience working in Istanbul. First of all, for the first project which I was invited to Turkey, came out one of the best-selling movies ever in the history of cinema in
Wow.
Turkey, and it was a biopic about one of the most famous arabesque singers in the history of the Turkish music, and the company, the digital Sanatlar company, they spent a lot of time, money, effort making that movie, and that was another jump start actually. So by grading on that movie was like another big leap for me. And then the director of that same movie just invited me for another project that he had. So it was an ongoing project then. So I was being invited to work on different projects. And then Netflix, because Netflix and Disney just investigated a lot of money in terms of production in Istanbul because of the Turkish speaking contents. The amount of the production is just like unprecedented. It's huge, so they really need talents to work in there. So I had the chance to work with a variety of different type of directors, cinematographers. But the thing that was quite different to me was just like I was so new to the whole industry in Turkey was the look of the picture. So the realism and the realistic approach to the cinematography in Iran wasn't quite the same practice in Turkey. So they wanted more pictorial approach to the picture. And I had to update my understanding about the whole industry because I had to know what exactly they want. What's the taste of, the whole industry in that. So I started to watch tons of Turkish movies to realize what's happening in there. But then I realized that they just invited me to stay away from the mainstream look that they had. And they wanted to something like
Ah.
something different. So I thought, okay,
So
yeah.
Can you tell me more about the difference between the two looks? So what would you say, how would you describe the
Um,
Iranian look and how would you describe the Turkish look?
it's very hard to tell these days because now like just everything just like getting similar to each other. But back then, um, I would say Iranian look was a bit more natural. So so there is a saying that eye is the reference, and what you see on set, you should like produce it in movie, but in a better way.
Ah,
So we
okay.
didn't used to go like crazy far away from realism back then. But nowadays it's like it's the same as everywhere else. But back then it was like I don't know, maybe that was because most of the DPs that I work with was migrating from the film world to the digital world. So in film world you are like you've got few film stocks and you've got the chemical lab, so you're not able to do all the crazy things that like these days are just being done. I wouldn't say by crazy in the good way, but
Yeah, yeah, sure.
yeah. But back then it was like stay to the realism, stay to the reality. Skin tones should be the most proper skin tones that you could have. Contrast should be like in a correct way. So everything should be like fine tuned. But
I like that that saying the eye is the reference. I like that.
yeah,
It's the eye on
yeah,
set.
exactly.
I like that.
And but in Turkish cinema, it was a bit more pictorialistic approach to the whole picture. So it should have had mood. It should have had like uh, um, glow to it. It should have had like color to it, contrast to it. So I had to learn how to do it. But at the end of the day, I just mixed them together. So I just borrowed little things from different like aspect of the like Iranian looks, Turkish look, like and DPs. So they used to invite DPs from Eastern Europe. So again, it was the third look that was like introduced to the whole thing. So I also had to learn how to do it the way they just do it in Eastern Europe. So what's the Eastern Europe taste then? So
And what was the Eastern Europe taste?
um ah yeah, the most pictorialistic approach to the picture, I would say. Yeah, it's very hard to
Right.
define it. It's very hard to define it. But I would say like Eastern European director of photographers changed Hollywood picture. Changed, I think, at some point in history of the Hollywood movie making, they changed the approach. They changed the approach to the picture. Like Janusz Kaminski, what he's been doing, like in contrast to like standard Hollywood look, which is like
Yeah.
very close to Iranian look, actually, honestly, I would say, because like most accurate skin tones, but feeling free to go beyond the horizons of like realism is a scary thing. You really need to know what you are doing.
Yeah, and like why you're doing it, surely, like what the feeling for the audience is going to be. I always think of the European look as being very soft, it doesn't have as much contrast and it's dark and you know it's like chalky blacks. This is just in my mind, like chalky blacks but low and subtle and the highlights are gentle. Maybe it's like having the sun at a different angle from what we're used to seeing in Australia as well helps. But um, I don't know, would you say that's in the ballpark?
Yes, exactly. And it was the first time I was experiencing working with the same material. So honestly, I was so confused. So I didn't know should I push the blacks down? Should I keep them soft? Should I?
Mm.
So because it wasn't my usual practice working on that type of picture. So honestly, I was super confused. What should I do with that kind of picture? Yeah. So slowly I learned how to. Okay, no, this should be that way. The contrast is like should be soft, should be dark. Skin tones are like warmish. So yeah,
And was it the DPs that kind of helped you with that understanding by asking you to grade in certain ways, or were you close with the DPs in learning that visual language?
For the first project, unfortunately, I was alone. So
Oh,
yeah, so the wonderful DP Martin, who's passed away this year, and unfortunately,
oh, I'm so
yeah.
sorry.
So he had to be on another project, and he was far away from the reach of the internet or any sort of, like um, possible image transfer uh, location. So I had to do it with the discussion and with the so we had like just like meeting with the director, and he tried to explain the whole thing to me. But unfortunately, I was a little bit alone, so I had to experience it myself and I had to learn it myself. But after that, I had the opportunity to work with director of photographers from Europe, from Germany, and from Eastern Europe. And then we had more discussions, and I learned slowly from them. Okay, that's the approach, that's the way. And it was a quite a successful experience in terms of learning new ways of grading. It was
That's
good.
so fascinating. Your instincts must have been good that first time when you were on your own.
I still don't know. That is just like working fine, but I enjoyed, and at the end of the day, I enjoyed working on that movie because the outcome was, I think it was successful, and I received a lot of compliments from the people, and I just like I I believe that they are just telling the truth. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
great. And you were working for sort of large facilities both in Iran and in Istanbul. They were both facility positions, like on staff colorist jobs.
Yes, fortunately. So there was the big one in Iran and the other two in Istanbul, 1000 Bol and Image, which now still they are the biggest post-production facilities in the town. And so I had another opportunity to work with colleagues, colorist colleagues in there and share ideas and tools sometimes.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah. You learn a
I
lot
think that's,
during those discussions with other colleagues. So yeah,
yeah,
and
you
they were
really do.
willing,
Yeah, it's
exactly. They were very willing to share their techniques, and so they didn't want to keep all those techniques for themselves. So they were really sharing, very willing to share all those secrets.
that's lovely. And what kind of did you work on any particular tools, or were you a little bit like open to lots of different systems, or did they have like an in-house system that everyone was on?
Yeah. So back in Tehran, we started with Iridas SpeedGrade, which is then became part of the Adobe SpeedGrade, and then just like merged into the Premiere. So there is no more Iridas. It was a good piece of software. Then we moved to Resolve after a while. But my first experience with Baselight actually was in 1000 volts in Istanbul. So I invited over for to work on a project on a feature film, and they said we got Baselight, we don't have Resolve here, and I said I'm gonna do that. Let's do it. So I had no idea how Baselight just works. And I had the biggest chance in there because it was around 2010, I think. I don't remember correctly. But I met Andy Minuth in there. So he was a chief colorist, senior colorist in 1000 Watt. And he used Baselight, and he shared a lot of information about Baselight with me. Now he's one of the
Wow.
heads of the Filmlight company. He's worldwide famous. But I had the opportunity to meet him, and it was my first encounter with Baselight system. In total, I think the version was like 4.4M, if I recall correctly, and it was quite different from the Baselight software that we have these days, especially version 6, which is awesome. But yeah, so I was very, very curious to know more about the Baselight, and eventually I had the chance to meet one of the masters of the Baselight back in then. And yeah, from so and then other companies, they had Resolve, which is still have Resolve. So it was juggling between Baselight and Resolve back in Istanbul.
That would have been fascinating to learn from Andy. I just can't think of a better teacher. How fortunate.
Possibly.
Um, and did you find it a challenge? Like obviously any new software is a challenge, but did it have any particular challenges moving into that, or were you just like a duck to water?
The first thing was, I think it was still in 4.4M back then, was scene referred grading, which I had absolutely no idea. What is the scene referred grading? What is an IDT? What is an RRT? What is a TRT?
Mm.
So because in June, just like in my normal pipeline, we had the LUT and we had the like show LUT, we had the like display target light and those like normal situations that everybody knows about, but the baseline was quite different. So again, I was super confused in the very first like of using baseline, which was like, what is that? What's the scene referred? How should I set the right IDT? What's an ODT? And fortunately, we had Andy in there to explain about all those things. And honestly, I fell in love with scene referred grading right from the first day I used the scene referred, because even the tools were like feeling different, and the possibilities were like endless. So could like, do the grading, and you had different ODTs, so you just like could deliver in a different like target displays easily. So yeah, honestly, it was like the concept of the scene referred grading actually just took shape in my mind by using the baseline the first time.
I know that you use ACEs a little bit, just through conversations that I've had with you. Were you using ACEs in Baselight as well as Resolve, or how did you like to approach that?
Honestly, I quite like the TCAM look, uh, but it's only
Okay.
available in Baselight. But anywhere else, I mean, Aces is like wonderful if you need it. So
Mm.
and honestly, I prefer to use Aces on Resolve more than Resolve's own color managed system. That's a personal preference, and it depends on the type of job that you are grading.
Mm.
But honestly, if I'm doing grading on Baseline, I definitely prefer to use TCAM, because the mixture of the TCAM and all the tools and like Colourist aware tools that the Baseline has, uh, they've got a better relationship between the tools and the TCAM, in my opinion. Maybe
Got you. And what are you looking for when you make that decision about what like ecosystem of color management you're going to use for a particular project? Like, do you look at how the footage responds under the different color management settings, or how the tools respond, or is it a contrast or a saturation thing?
like
What are you
there
thinking
are a
about?
lot of people who really dislike the look of the Aces. So because there is a look like implemented, baked in Aces color pipeline, which is a very Kodaki look in my opinion. So it depends. So the most important thing, like to not having a personal preference. It's all about discussions with the DP and the director, and if they really like it.
Mm.
So the thing is that I'll show them all the
Mm.
options that we've got, like in Baselight, it's TCAM and ACES, or like maybe sometimes video grade, which video space, which is the Baselight offers. In Resolve, in like its own CMS and ACES, so we can do the comparison. We can decide which one is much more suitable for the movie, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that like what people would see on their screens or on a big screen. So it's not a
Mm.
personal preference, and I think I shouldn't have a personal preference, because then everything would look like the same.
I agree with you so much about that. And I was actually having this discussion just the other day with a different colorist, about having that flexibility and looking at what works for the particular show, um, and not being too tied down to just having one way that you like to work. But, when you're in a high pressure situation, sometimes it can be really nice to just fall back on the things that work for you. And then you find yourself doing the same things over and over and
Exactly.
over again. But yeah, I really like that approach of just seeing what works for the show and what gets the DP and the director to see the footage in the way that they wanted to see it, of course.
Absolutely.
I love that. And so you must feel pretty confident grading in all kinds of tool sets and all kinds of scenarios then. Like I know that you're kind of bilingual with the Baselight and the Resolve, but even within them, you would feel as confident grading in like DaVinci Wide Gamut as you would in Aces.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to be ready for all the challenges for each different color pipeline would bring for you. I mean, so Aces is got its own challenges, as well as the CMS, as well as the like the DaVinci Wide Gamut, as well as the the TCAM. So each of them, they've got pros and cons. But yeah, yeah. So working enough on all of those color pipelines would like add to your experience as a colorist. So I think you should, as a colorist, a colorist generally should try all of those color pipeline workflows to realize what's the abilities, what's the outcome of using the particular color managed system. Then you could choose more wisely which one would be much more suitable for that show. So yeah.
And do you like to work, and I know this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but this is where I kind of get really nerdy and interested. Do you like to work project wide in that, like say, for example, you were setting up as Resolve Color Managed. Would you work project wide Resolve Color Managed, or do you like to do it in nodes?
I definitely would go for the project settings. Yeah. It's easier for me.
Okay.
There is nothing wrong to do it on your node structure. But honestly, if you take a look at how Baselight actually works, so you set the proper color managed system for your project and you go through that project. And sometimes you change it to different things. So because tags can be color space agnostic, so you could have different color space for different stacks. But generally, in an overall thing, you have a general like color engine which is processing your material. So I would prefer to go like a global project setting for the project, honestly.
I'm the same usually. I'm the same usually for setting up color management, and I know there's like lots of debate around it, and some people like to work scene referred for some operations and then come out of scene referred and do other things in display referred spaces. And I think it depends on the show that you're working on, but I like the tidiness of working project wide. And I also like how it kind of emulates that, simpler telecine style of working where you've got one contrast curve, one tone curve for the whole show, and you don't go outside of that. So all of the choices that you make get funneled through that, and there's no option to kind of go outside of that. I think that kind of gives you some kind of coherence to the piece that you might break. You might fiddle around with too much otherwise, because you'd have the option, so you might try. But in Baselight, when you're working color managed in Baselight, do you ever mix and match your RRTs and your I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the exact terminology, but do you ever sort of work in TCAM on your timeline, but ACEs for your RRT or anything like that?
So you have to define if you're working with the TCAM or if you want to work with the ACES, because if you switch from ACES to TCAM after like your grading, it wouldn't look correct.
But you can use an RRT that's different. Like,
yes, but I mean,
do you ever do that?
That's too complicated for me.
You keep it simple.
Yeah. When we just like most people, I use like fixed node trees in Resolve because it gives peace of mind and simplifies the whole process. So, for instance, node number whatever is just always my skin tone node. So node number 1 and 2 and 3 is just like my basic ratings. So I don't need to think about how many nodes I'm gonna make and keep it simple. I
Mm,
mean, it just like makes the whole life easier. Like if you keep everything just like as simple as possible.
I love that. Do you like to work with looks or LUTs or anything like that? Do you have a little set of secret sauce that you like to bring out? You don't have to tell me exactly what it is.
Oh no, that's fine. There is thanks to the internet, there is no secret sauce anymore. So because people are sharing ideas all over the internet, and so yeah, and these days, like if you search about anything, you could find it. But I prefer a few scene-referred look development tools, which I really quite like it. Because then when the look is just like work for the scene-referred color pipeline, you will have access to different variety of for ODTs or DRTs. So you just use a particular look for your Rec 79, and that same look works very good for your P3, sometimes Rec 2020, depending on the type of the curve that you're using. But you're not limited to very like limited Rec 709 lots that you might be using for in your pipeline then, because if you shift it to different ODTs, which these days you have to deliver a lot of different deliverables in terms of color space and contrast and curves and everything. So you have to be, I mean, it's easier. It makes life easier to develop a look in a scene referred space. So there are particular softwares to do that. Honestly, we had the opportunity, and thanks to you, I mean, so you explained a lot about the the chromogen in Baselight version 6, which is a scene referred look development. So it's much easier. And the point is that if you use this chromogen, for instance, to develop your look on ACES and Baselight, you can share it to Resolve, you can share it to VFX departments, so everybody would be in the same page in terms of using the same look. So it's not like variety of different looks, and you can have different variety of the same look in Rec 709 P3, which almost looks the same. So yeah, I would love to use the look designing and look development programs plugins slash
mm. Yeah,
in-
chromogen's really something special, I think. I've never seen anything like it before. For people who aren't familiar with what we're talking about here, version 6 of Baselight has a new operator called Chromogen, which is a primary operator, and it gives you the color space sort of like you can almost mold it and shape it using what they're called stages. So you're directly molding the color space itself, not doing secondaries or anything like that. It's one of those things that you almost have to do. I can't really explain it without showing it, but they visualize the color space either as a cube or as a you call it
EAB
thing.
color model.
Yeah, yeah, it's the EAB color model, but what's that other shape? Well, I don't know why I can't remember the name of it right now. Anyway, they've got a different couple of shapes that they
Yeah.
visualize this color space in, and you use stages to define things like contrast, color crosstalk, the amount of saturation in different parts of the image. Things that you might otherwise use curves for, like hue versus hue or hue versus sat, you can do there. And you can develop really quite intricate and specialized looks. You can define densities for different tones and different shades of colors. And you can come up with something that's really unique. And you can also, I think you could emulate references pretty precisely with something like that as well. But it's quite new, and I'm sure that the possibilities with it are just going to open up as people start to talk about how they're particularly using it, like all things. But so the workflow that we're discussing now would be to sort of use that tool to, within a color managed project, to then output a look in like either a cube form or whatever form you can output. And then you can pass it around to various different parts of the production. So you might use it, on the split or in the camera on set. You might use it for dailies. You might use it for visual effects. And then you might also use that as your show look that you're grading underneath when you get to the DI, or you might refine it in the process as well, because it's always going to be open. But that's a lot of talking from me. I should stop and actually talk to Hootan.
That was a really comprehensive explanation because it's already new, and I think it's gonna be a very it's gonna be a favorite tool for many colorists very soon.
Yeah, and I think DPs are going to really like it as well.
Yeah, because it speaks in the same language as the DP's language. Yeah.
Yeah, I can really see that being quite useful when you're sitting down and doing that look development at the start of a show. So we've gotten as far as Istanbul, and how long were you in Istanbul for?
It was an on and off situation, so I was coming and over, like it's like coming and going. I think it was started from 2017, but I think from 2020 I just moved to Istanbul because I wasn't enjoying anymore working on Iranian productions. It was quite a bit different from the day that it just like worked with like masters of the industry. So I thought it's time to move, and then I just moved to
Hmm.
Istanbul. And yeah, spending time in Istanbul, I had the opportunity to move to Melbourne. So now I'm in Melbourne and try to find my position. And fortunately, I've got a wonderful friends, DP friends here. So now we are working together, and slowly, the whole business is just like developing here as well.
Yeah, so when I first met you, you're not little, but your shop in Melbourne had just opened like the week before. And I met yourself and your business partner, and you had two stories. One of them was with production gear, and the other one was for post production. And you, of course, were heading up the post production. You had a couple of pretty impressive systems there for grading. And what was it that brought you to Melbourne to begin with, though? Was it that business, or was it the study that you did at RMIT?
Most probably, it was RMIT's study. So I thought, so I had, like my progress through the years was mostly towards the technical part of the spectrum. But um, I really had, I really was super keen to know more about the theory, know more about why I'm doing this. So I did a bit of research, and I actually finally applied for a Master of Photography course, which after a few interviews with lecturers of RMIT, so they just like picked me. And it just the outcome was like unprecedented. I wasn't thinking that how the outcome would be, but it was massive. I had no idea how they're going to change my whole perception and perspective to the world of the color and imaging and digital imaging and everything.
Wow.
So yeah, so at least I when start a new movie, I got like few whys, big whys and big question marks in my mind that I have to answer. So why I'm doing this? Why I'm choosing that color palette? What's the correct approach to that movie? So the way that I'm just doing the grading is quite different from the way that I'm just been doing it, just like by following the instructions and following the techniques. So it's like a balance of the theory and the technique all together. So it was, and no, I feel it was quite necessary to realize why you should choose that particular color palette for that particular movie. Is it all about the genre? Is it all about the feeling? Is it all about the subconscious uh, effect of the colors on the audience's mind, and the feeling of the texture of the picture, and everything is just involved. And I had the opportunity to meet masters of the industry at RMIT, and I'm quite thankful to all of them. All my lecturers were fantastic, so I feel much more confident these days in terms of approaching to a picture, even just
Mm.
for photo photo editing. It's a quite different practice these days for me.
Oh, you make me want to go and do a master's of photography. That's that's
I thought you
awesome.
can. Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's great when you're coming into a country that you haven't lived in before to, I mean, when you were going over to Istanbul, you were going into work environments where you were meeting people, but coming out to Australia to be part of a course and to have that kind of built-in network that you get when you're studying, that's really great, because it can be hard to make friends as an adult when you move. I've moved a couple of times and as an adult, and I found that it's not like it was when you were kids and you just oh, we're in the same class, so we're friends. Or I've got a little boy and he's just like, oh, you're my age, let's be best friends. It's
Well,
it's a bit harder when you're
I've
an
been
adult.
lucky. I've been lucky. I've got the best friends at RMIT, from the classes, which I love them. I wouldn't think that I could have those friends in my life in Australia. So yeah, those are the best people that I just met already, and I quite appreciate it. Yeah, some of them are just
Oh,
like
that's awesome.
huge photographers based in Adelaide, based in Melbourne, based in Sydney. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. And you met your current business partner, who's somebody who you actually knew from Iran, who you happened to meet him in Melbourne and came up with the idea of teaming up to open AZ Studios. So that was a good chance meeting as well.
Absolutely. So he's got a big rental house. Still, he's got a big rental house in Tehran. So he's quite active in there, in providing equipments for big productions. And he realized that I'm here, and I realized that he's here. So we had some few meetings with each other, and we thought, I don't see why not. We should do something in terms of what we love and what we are going to do. And he provided all the necessary infrastructure for the post production, and now he's just developing his production part of the business. And I think in the next few years, the whole production would be post production of the AZ studio would be a very successful business. Hopefully, it depends. It's hard to start when you just
Yeah.
arrive, but it needs a lot of effort. It needs a lot of like extra hard work that you really don't need to do it after a while when you find when you
Yeah.
establish your business somewhere else, but you have to do everything else again from the 0 point. This is what it is, but it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that's true of anyone, moving and working in a new market, whether you're starting a business or whether or not you're a freelancer who's just entering a new market, because, you're very established and extremely well known overseas. And you're just now starting to get to know Australian directors and DPs and, building that reputation here. So, can you tell me a little bit about what that process has been like for you and what kind of work you're working on now?
Well, honestly, this is a very slow process. Knowing people, getting to know people, and
Yeah.
and this is all about the trust, because nobody wants
Yeah.
to work with someone who they don't have trust on them or they don't know them. So you should slowly get to know more people, and this is the process that we are just doing it. And every day we meet new people, we meet new production houses, we meet new DOPs, we meet new directors, and we try to have as much as possible meeting with them, speaking, talking, sharing ideas with them, and grow the market in a positive way. But honestly, it's a very
Mm.
slow process, and it needs quite a bit of time. But again, it's a big challenge, but it's the very lovely and very delightful challenge, because
Mm.
that's what I love to do. So it's like all the new ground to play, all the new people
Yeah.
I'm gonna meet. So why not? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get you. I mean, that idea of a lovely challenge is quite nice. But it is like even though we live in a global world and you have colorists who are quite famous now, people know who they are, and I could probably name 10 colorists in London who I've never met who I'd be happy to work with. It's different now than the way it used to be when I first started, where it was like, what's a colorist? Who's a colorist? It's more widely known. But at the same time, I don't know if it's because Australia is quite small, but it seems to be it's a tough market to crack into. And you've got a lot of networking that happens, and um, what am I trying to say? I suppose relationships, like you say, take a long time, and you kind of grow up together in the industry in a way. In Australia, there's like a lot of, oh, we met at film school and we're still working together after 15 years. And, all of those people start to get bigger and bigger jobs together, and they've got these little networks. And I can only imagine that would be quite tricky to crack into. But, your personality is so warm and so kind. And I think that, people do enjoy having a chat with you, so that's got to definitely help.
That's so kind
I
of
don't
you.
know if that's a question either. That's just a statement.
Well, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean, it's the same as everywhere. If you just want to start over, even in Iran, which I'm not quite sure how how is the situation these days, but everywhere else, especially these days, which being a colorist is not as hard as like years ago, 2009 and 2010, because you had to spend a lot of money and infrastructure to run a studio. But thanks to the development of the technology, it's not harder these days. So the
Mm.
competition in the market is higher than before. So you have to work harder. You have to compete harder. You have to work much more than before to reestablish at least yourself. But again, at the end of the day, these are the challenges that you accept when you just move to somewhere else. And so the goal is to be successful, but at the end of the day, you have to try.
Yeah,
Unless you really know.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I know exactly what you mean. You just have to go into it going like, this will work. Just give it enough time. But I mean, also speaking about being in a global world, my understanding is at the moment that you're working mainly on foreign productions, working remotely, and working in the cloud a bit as well. So, can you tell me a bit about that? Because I think that's a really cool thing that you're able to pick up and move about as far away as possible, and still be able to work with your clients over in Istanbul.
Yeah, so the cloud is just like a savior. So it doesn't matter anymore where you are, and remote work is like easiest than before. So years ago, you had to have a huge infrastructure to work remotely, but these days, thanks to all the technology, it's much easier. So I still have ties with my clients all around the world, and when they prefer to work with me, for instance, it's not that hard anymore. So I don't have to be in there to work with them. So still, I have ties with projects which is happening in Turkey. So at the moment, I'm working on a Netflix project. It's a mini series. At the same time, I'm working with a feature film from Germany, um, and projects from Australia, not feature films, like mostly commercials. So the whole thing is just much easier, and you really don't feel that much difference these days between being in the same location or being far away from the location, but
Wow.
working with the same people. It's much easier these days to work remotely, and sometimes it's even better because now, for instance, like my director sits in his suitable room, which he prefers to be in it, not in a like 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 those uh, I wouldn't say unpleasant situations that he really don't want to be, but I would say the places he prefers to be. And
Mm.
I'm sitting on my favorite chair, few thousand kilometers away, but we work together like we were sitting in the same room. So yeah, it's easier, and I think in the future people would prefer to work remotely much more than even now it's been practiced these days.
Do you have any particular technologies that you utilize for these sessions? Do you use like Zoom or Colorfront or, remote monitoring or anything in particular?
Yeah, of course. Um, so I started the same project. So when I did the same Netflix project here, when the studio AZ Studio didn't exist actually. So the first part of the project was happened in Post Lab, uh, and they were using ColorFront solutions for the real-time streaming, which was fantastic. I quite liked it. And then Resolve introduced their remote monitoring system, which is also good. And Baselight is also having their own kind of remote monitoring solution. So there are a lot of technologies around, and almost all of them are quite reliable. So not quite different
That's
these
good.
days from each other, but it's good enough. It's good enough to work with any of those technologies.
And how do you handle the issue of different screens? Do you like send an iPad over to your directors or do you just ask that they look at it on something they trust? How do you deal with it?
So for this particular project that I'm working on, we had a list of possible monitors that they could buy. So they bought almost the same monitors as we have in Studio E.
Oh, great.
So we are looking at the same picture. But
Oh, that's
sometimes,
perfect.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's impossible to control the situation everywhere. But
Mm.
yeah, sometimes iPads are working. Like now, most of the displays can be calibrated as much as as close as possible to the right picture. So I would never know that if they are looking at the same exact picture as me, but
Yeah.
if we follow some instructions, at least the pictures are much closer, in terms of contrast and color and gamut and everything. But impossible. I mean, at least in my situation.
Oh, it's so good that you've got almost the same monitor or pretty much the same monitor going on because that's the ideal scenario.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
And then you
But,
think if both are calibrated, you should be pretty much right.
yeah, yeah.
Can you tell me before we wrap up, because I have taken a lot of your time this evening, can you tell me like what you think the differences are between these different markets that you've worked in? Is there anything that sort of is glaringly obviously different between them, or is it just filmmaking's filmmaking everywhere you go?
Um, well, this I think the cinema language is almost the same everywhere, and people also, the contractions, the the relationships, the talks, the terms are almost the same. But I would say, if I'm gonna do a global comparison between the Iranian and Turkish and Australian cinema, the approach to the picture and the final result is a little bit still different. I mean, in terms of everything, in terms of the like the whole workflow, which sometimes in Iranian projects we don't have such a like show lot, so every decision is just like made after during the grading session. In Istanbul, it's a like a 50-50 person. Some director photographers really like to have their show lots. And in Australia also it's like a 50-50 person as my experience. I don't know if it's correct or not, so you know better. But again, the final picture, if you just put the same picture from three different locations, it would be like three different pictures. So the taste of the region
Mm.
could be different. But again, um, thanks to the digital platforms, Now I think everything just like getting closer to each other, because like these are nowadays are the references of the pictures, so everybody wants to follow the same references, which I think is not a very good thing, but this is what it is. It's happening.
Sure. Yeah, there does seem to be a bit of convergence going on. I
Exactly.
mean, I think that just looking at your work, and this is something that's hard to know about yourself, but I think you've got a bit of a style, Hootan. I really do. And I think that, when people want you as their colorist, they're probably thinking, I want a little bit of that Hootan flavor on my work. Because when I look at your footage, it's always, you're a very well controlled kind of gamut. You shape your color ranges down and compress them so that there's not a lot of sort of disparate kind of colors. You tend to choose a color scheme, like you usually use a like duotone or tritone complementary color scheme. And I tend to see like lots of cool tones throughout your pictures as well. And you tend to be like low range in the mids usually. And, you don't do sort of like real poppy bright stuff. I wouldn't sort of think to myself, that's a Hooten grade if I saw something really bright and poppy.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it's hard to know that about yourself, but even with all of these different regional tastes, I think that you're bringing something that's a little bit you to all of them, to be honest.
well, I try to not to do it, but maybe
I
it's
know, but it
again
sneaks in, right?
I mean, when you work on something, even if you make something out of wood, you put some of yourself in it. Something
Yeah,
something from your soul, something from your touch. Impossible not to do that. But what I've tried to be as much as possible in the work in the favor of the picture. So
yeah.
that was my goal. But again, you're super right. You're absolutely right. It's impossible not to.
I think there's just a little flavor there, but it's not to say that your work is all the same. I think that you just have an aesthetic approach, and everyone probably does. But I think it's easier to see from a distance than when you're in it. Um,
Okay, thank you so much for.
I think it's a really beautiful aesthetic. I'm not definitely not saying that they're all the same at all. And of course, you're going to approach them looking for the best things in that picture. But yeah, you just have a way of shaping your colors that I think is really, it's got a lot of subtlety to it. And it's also really painterly. And that might be that European influence that comes through because, it's not all, you don't use like heavy, mid-tone pivoted contrast that has like lots of, you know, highlights and lots of
Yeah,
crunchy blacks. It does have a lot more range to the image, I notice. And I think you also, tend to have that duo or tritone color palette, and you can have a little bit more saturation in it when you aren't going as hard on the contrast. I think like these are things that I would say
well,
from the outside, that's what I see in your work, but it's all very beautiful.
thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's
I mean,
lovely to see.
the first DP, the first lecture that just like introduced me to the whole world of the post production. He was one of the most pickiest people in terms of color matching. So we used to work together, and in the middle of the picture, he used to say, "Go to the first shot," and we just jump to the first shot. This is 1 point red. Reduce it. And he was
Mm,
that accurate, so I learned to be accurate in that terms. But again, you're right. I loved the European approach to the picture, and it just stick to my mind somewhere in my mind. So I really prefer that approach to the picture. But again, yeah, these are happening without you knowing it in your subconscious mind.
yeah.
Maybe yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, or working with somebody who's that precise, that'd be definitely a good training ground. But I can see how at the end of a long week you might be like, I've had enough of that now.
Yes.
On that note, I should probably wrap things up because I have taken a lot of your time out this evening. Thank you so much for talking to me, Hootan. It's been absolutely great to get a sense of your incredible traveling career. So for Mixing Light, this is Kaylee Bateman. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. It's been an honor to have a chat with you. Thank you so much.